All right, so today we are going to go over, we're going to actually introduce the fallacies. Um, Fallacies are common mistaken patterns of argumentation in informal arguments. They're very common, frankly, in advertising. Very common in political discourse by all sides, frankly. They're very common in, just in argumentation in general. As we discussed last time, ideally we want arguments that have proper structures, either deductive validity or inductive strength. That's fine. I see somebody removed my yellow guard strip. I would really like it if you could give me that strip back at some point.
Oh, the people doing the play, Bobby pulled it up. I asked if that remained as well.
Okay, so again, we want a properly structured argument. We want the premises to be true. We want clarity in language. We need to avoid circularity, ambiguity concerning definitions. We want neutral language, and of course, we want the argument to be actually relevant to the issue at hand. All right, since I'm going to define each of these in later slides, I don't need to say anything about these here. Okay, so here, let's start with circularity. Much like circular definitions aren't very useful, circular arguments are not useful. So what circular arguments usually do is they simply restate as a conclusion the claim made in a premise. And what's wrong, the reason why circular arguments are bad is something like this. Anyone who would question the conclusion would accept the premise to the argument. So here, let's all right, so premise, the 1927 Yankees are the best baseball team in history. Therefore, the 1927 Yankees are better than every other baseball team. Anyone who would question the second part isn't going to acknowledge the first part. So the reason why circular arguments are bad, even if the premise is true, is because it's going to be unpersuasive to anyone who would doubt the conclusions. Anyone who would doubt the conclusion would also doubt the premise. And anyone who would accept the premise doesn't need the argument because they already accept the conclusion. So there's zero people sort of in between that a circular style argument would persuade. So this example of a circular argument, of course, is is very obvious. Sometimes there are versions of circular arguments that are more subtle. So when we get to the problems, the exercises hopefully will engage a few circular arguments that are more subtle. Okay, fallacy of ambiguity and equivocation. All right, we've talked about we want to avoid ambiguous language. The primary problem with ambiguous language is this, is ambiguous language is used in such a way whereas the meaning of a word is either unclear or shifts in the usage. So let's get back to the 1927 Yankees. Let's say I say the 1927 Yankees are the best in history. And then I want to conclude from that, therefore, the 1927 Yankees are better people than Mother Teresa, Bono, Gandhi, Martin Luther King. Pick the moral exemplar of your choice, Jesus. So the idea here is the word best in premise one. What does the usage of the word best in premise one refer to? What are they great at? Right. I mean, when you're talking about sports heroes and that they're the greatest of all time or the best or good, you're not talking about moral goodness. You're talking about sports skill. So the premise is about sports skill, but the conclusion shifts from best at sports to best morally. And that is an ambiguous use of language. So you need to remember, you need to be careful to consistently use words in the same way in every premise and conclusion of your argument. Strangely, I encourage you to put a star next to this one. Students have trouble identifying this one. And I'm not really sure why, but I would encourage you, if you're not sure what's wrong with one of the exercises, look closely at the language in the argument and see if there's something weird about the way the language is used. Is there some word or phrase that the meaning or usage of the word seems to shift or doesn't quite make sense? Sometimes I think you just need to try to read some of these arguments with a sense of humor and just see, is there something in here that's so weird that I should laugh at? And often that is a cue that, that there's kind of a joke. There's language being sort of intentionally misused, like something out of a Monty Python movie. All right, opposition fallacy. Frankly, way too common. Opposition fallacy is this. Position X is held by people we don't like. Doesn't matter which specific people we don't like, but whatever group. So position X is held by socialists, communists, fundamentalists, racists, Muslims, fascists, Nazis, bigots, whatever the group is that you don't like, position X is held by this group. Therefore, you should not hold position X. So usually this is sort of in-group conversation where there's some supposed enemy out there, and the enemy holds this view. Therefore, you should reject it. So here's what it might sound like. You know what? Hitler wanted more funding for schools too. Therefore, we should not send more funding to schools. Well, let's say it's even true. Maybe Hitler did fund the schools well. So what? That doesn't matter. That doesn't make funding schools better. I think people really overuse Nazi Hitler language because there are trivial things that people can have in common with Hitler, and it's not really what things are about. So here's one. Most of you are like Hitler. Most of you are white. So therefore you are like Hitler. Or Silverman is like Hitler. He's a white man with a mustache. I mean, these are stupid similarities, and when we call somebody Hitler or a Nazi, we are hopefully referring to something more morally germane than that. Let me give you a hint. Unless your idea is to invade Poland or set up concentration camps where millions die, you are probably not like Hitler in the appropriate sense. Generally, I mark down any paper that mentions Hitler unless it is extraordinarily careful about the way it uses it. All right, fallacy of irrelevance, also called besides the point. There are lots of things that we can say on a topic that are not necessarily germane or relevant to the conclusion. So here, I happen to be biased towards liking chocolate ice cream. So let's say my argument is chocolate ice cream is the tastiest flavor of ice cream, and chocolate ice cream is the most popular flavor of ice cream. Therefore, chocolate ice cream is the healthiest flavor of ice cream. You see what I did there? So I raised 2 points that are good about chocolate ice cream, 2 reasons why someone might think it's good, but then I concluded something that really isn't connected to them. That is called the fallacy of irrelevance, or besides the point. And again, I see this all the time. All right, straw man fallacy. Straw man fallacy is always about criticizing somebody else's view. But here's what it does wrong. It criticizes a view that the other person doesn't actually hold, or only like the most extreme member of a group would hold. So I saw this many years ago in a debate. One of the candidates said, "Hey, I've got a healthcare solution. Let's give more money to the states and focus on state level funding for medical care instead of on a national one-size-fits-all policy." The other candidate said, "Oh my God, did you just hear what the senator said? He wants to dismantle the healthcare system." Well, that's not a proper That's not a proper description of what the senator is proposing. So all that to say, a straw man fallacy is where you criticize a view that the other person doesn't actually hold. All right, appeal to the crowd. Appeal to the crowd argument claims in its premises that a belief is popular, and it concludes from a belief's popularity to a belief's truthfulness. So here are various ways of making this argument. 50 billion McDonald's customers can't be wrong. Well, yeah. It used to be at McDonald's, they would like change the sign periodically. It used to have like millions served, and they would like change the sign to 5 or 6 and 10 million served. All the cool kids are voting for Allison. Or you should believe view X because it's politically correct, which is a way of saying it is popular in certain with a certain group. So whenever you are claiming that a view is popular with a certain group, that it is desirable to agree with, or that the majority of people believe something, that it must be true, that is an illegitimate argumentation form. Now, we will have a discussion about experts in the future. There is a proper way to appeal to experts, but here we're just talking about people more generally. Genetic fallacy. This is where you claim that a position must be false because you can explain the genesis, the origins of why somebody holds that view, and the origins of that view are not, might be something that's doubted. So here's something that's probably true. You believe that the races and sexes are equal. Frankly, if you don't believe that, you probably shouldn't say it out loud. But why do we believe it? Well, we believe in an egalitarian society that indoctrinates us with that belief since the time we're very young. All the TV shows you watch say it, all of your teachers say it. So you were never really given the choice to think otherwise. So it concludes from premise one, and premise one is probably largely true. But the conclusion doesn't follow. Beliefs that you are indoctrinated with aren't necessarily false. I mean, you might want to do a little double checking, but just because you were raised a certain way and to believe something, that doesn't mean that the belief is false. We also see this kind of argument with religion. Oh, you believe that because you were raised in that religion. Well, that's not an argument against religion being true. It's just an irrelevant comment about how you originally came to the belief. Okay. Appeal to ignorance. Now, ignorance here, you have to be careful about the word ignorance. Some people think the word ignorance is an insult. And in some contexts, it might be. But when we call, in logic, when we call something an appeal to ignorance fallacy, we're making a very specific claim. The appeal to ignorance claim is this. It is an argument that starts with a claim that essentially asserts that an issue is unresolved. And then it attempts to move from the fact that an issue is unresolved to saying, therefore, my view must be correct. So usually the hint is that you can use a variation of the same claim for both conclusions, for both opposite conclusions. So you might say, well, look, no one has ever disproven the existence of God, therefore God must exist. And then you've got the reverse view. No one has proven the existence of God, therefore God must not exist. So again, in both cases, you move from a premise that says essentially this issue is unresolved to a conclusion that says, let's resolve it my way. So that is what the appeal to ignorance refers to. The idea that because we're ignorant on a matter, we must resolve it in my preferred direction. All right, now this one is actually my personal favorite, the false cause fallacy. sometimes called the post hoc fallacy. And essentially assume something is a cause of an effect or a phenomenon or an event without sufficient proof. Now, there are lots of weird statistical correlations. Now, what I love about this one is this premise is actually true. Whenever ice cream sales go up, so does violent crime. Therefore, when I run for governor of Virginia, I am going to institute a full ice cream ban. Yeah, I'll get 0 votes on that. But the point is, so we start with ice cream sales go up, so does crime, a true claim. Therefore, ice cream causes crime. See how that one works? Sometimes this is summed up in a phrase called this: correlation is not causation. This is called a spurious correlation. Anyone know why ice cream sales and crime go up at the same time? Right. So here's the strange thing about crime. More crime happens when people go out of their houses that are safe and locked. So the more people mingle in the summer, there's more opportunities for crime. Strangely, crime goes down in the winter. Why? Because it's too cold to go outside and mug somebody. And because, people that might be victims of crime are staying home with their nice warm houses. But in the summer, they go out, they meet strangers, and sometimes, a statistically significant increase, bad things, violent crime happens. Another strange thing happens in the summer. People feel hot, and they want to pay for this weird cool stuff called ice cream. Therefore, ice cream causes crime. And there's lots of weird statistical correlations that work like that. There's an old saying. There's 3 kinds of lies. There's damn lies, and then there's statistics. All right, an emotional appeal. An emotional appeal is an argument that relies more on manipulating emotions through overly positive or overly negative language. Remember our discussion last chapter about overly positive or overly negative language? Here is the full-on fallacy based on that. So emotional appeal is an argument that relies more on manipulating emotion through use of overly positive or overly negative charged language rather than genuine content. The senator's bill is a stupid suggestion. Well, it might be a stupid suggestion, but we need a reason why it's stupid. If you just call it stupid, that's just name calling. That's just an emotional appeal. These tax cuts are racist. Well, okay, it might be, but you've got to flesh that out somewhere. Disagreeing with me is hate speech. As Michael Scott has said, I hated it. That's not what hate speech is. So again, the idea here is watch out. The more overly positive or negative language that's being used, the more I encourage you to increase your skepticism. Because if someone's trying to engage your emotions instead of your reason, they're trying to get you emotionally charged up. They're really not trying to persuade you rationally. So I'd encourage you, be careful. Appeal to inappropriate authority. This is an argument based on an appeal to an authority that is not a genuine expert on the relevant topic. Commercials used to do this all the time. Celebrity endorsements of various kinds. So I grew up in the New York City TV market, and pitcher Tom Seaver was very popular up there, and he did a series of commercials for a mortgage lending service called the Money Store. This is stuck in the back of my head to this day, 40 years later. Tom Seaver, probably your guy, you want to learn how to throw a fastball, but I have no idea why anyone would think he is a good person to take lending advice from. I mean, there's a rich guy. He doesn't really need. Oprah says we should try the South Beach diet. Well, Oprah's not a nutritionist. I mean, maybe she can give a testimonial. Maybe she can say South Beach worked for me or something like that. But still, at the end of the day, She's a talk show host. She's not a nutritionist or dietitian or exercise expert. Or comedian Jerry Seinfeld says we should change our immigration policy. Well, maybe we should change our immigration policies, but surely we can find somebody who's a more relevant expert than Jerry Seinfeld. Jerry Seinfeld, he's your guy if you want to learn how to crack a few jokes. Hopefully our immigration policy isn't just a joke. All right, so how to distinguish appeals to the crowd and appeals to inappropriate authority from a proper appeal to an appropriate authority. Proper appeal to an appropriate authority is something like this. Person X, expert X views claim A is true. Expert X is a genuine authority on the subject. Watch out for, speaking as a professor, watch out for people who claim titles like professor and doctor, but it's in like the wrong topic. This is something that's been known to happen. Premise 3, the consensus of the people who are in that authority group agree with view X. You don't want to find like the 1 in 10,000, outlier that disagrees with the majority consensus. And what's the most important is conclusion 4. The conclusion has to be sort of weak. The conclusion can't be dogmatic. Therefore, there is some reason to believe view A is true. So watch out for people who want to overstate things. The science is settled. I heard people say this like 2 months into the pandemic. Like, oh my God, it's been 2 months of data. Very little is settled. We can say, yeah, okay. There's some reason to believe this, but watch out for people who say the science is settled or, overly dogmatic. This is, it's, again, you're getting into that emotionally charged area and not a genuine, appropriate appeal to authority. Part-whole fallacy. Part-whole fallacy is when we assume every part of a whole must share a feature held by the whole, or that the whole must share a feature held by each part. So here's a couple of examples of this. Each part of this airplane is light. Therefore, the entirety of the plane must be lightweight. Well, it doesn't work that way. Accumulation of weight can result in something really heavy. Here's one you have to watch out with spending. Each expenditure in this budget is reasonable. Therefore, the budget as a whole must be reasonable. It doesn't usually work that way. Usually, there's some point where you just have to stop spending. And even if what you're spending on is a good thing, or even if you're getting a good value on it, it doesn't mean there's a point where you've reached a non-reasonable, irresponsible whole, even if each individual expenditure is a good expenditure. And similarly, this sports team is great, therefore each member of the sports team must be great. Generally it helps if each member of the sports team is great, but sometimes if you have a couple superstars and you've got a couple average good sports players, that could work too. If you've got Tom Brady, your third string receiver, it's okay for your third string receiver to not be great, and you can probably still win. Ad hominem. This is where the argument is again, essentially irrelevant, changing the topic. It is attacking the character of the person rather than addressing the topic itself. So let's say I want to smear the senator. Senator X, Senator Smith is making a budget proposal, but Senator Smith is an adulterous liar. Therefore, we should not listen to this budget proposal. Unless there's probably some exception to this. If the senator somehow directly benefits from the proposal, then maybe that would be a reason to consider it. But yeah, generally, ad hominems is where we're having a conversation about somebody's character, premises about somebody's character, but a conclusion about something other than the person's character. Pro-con argument. A pro-con argument is where you only consider the advantages or only consider the disadvantages of a proposal, and you don't consider both the pros pros and the cons. Watch out for any major proposal that never has any cons. It's almost certainly it's almost certainly leaving things out. My personal favorite example of this is, let's say I am an insulation salesman and I've got this super effective lightweight insulation that is low cost. You know, those are all the pros. What's the insulation called? Asbestos. In case you don't know, asbestos can kill you if you inhale it. So, you know, it's only one con. It's a pretty serious con. But again, it's an argument that only lists one side. So for any proposal, I suggest you try to figure out what both the pros and the cons are. A black and white fallacy, or sometimes called false dilemma. What makes something a black and white fallacy is this. It's when I pretend there are only two options. The one I want to do and a really stupid option that nobody would like. In reality, there's usually a dozen options. So here, we must either do A or B, but option A is ridiculous, so we have to do B. The false part is we must do either A or B. Or in real life, it might sound something like this. We must attack country X immediately, or the terrorists will win. Well, nobody wants terrorists. Right? So, you can justify anything with this kind of logic. So that is, again, called the false dilemma, black and white fallacy. False stereotypes or overgeneralizations. It assumes all members of a group share the features of certain members of the group. And these are, I think you all know what stereotypes are. One important thing to realize is there are both positive and negative stereotypes. So you can say all members of race X are criminals. That, of course, is a bad stereotype. But it's also a stereotype to say all members of race X are good at math. Same way all religious people are irrational, or all religious people are kind. All capitalists are heartless and uncaring, or all capitalists are hardworking. Again, the point here is where you move from a premise that basically says, this seems to be a common trait of this group, therefore they all are like that. And usually when you think that way, you're being pretty lazy, and you start getting sort of selective biases where you just only notice instances that reinforce your already existing prejudice. So watch out for that. Appeal to force. An argument that relies on a threat rather than actual rational persuasion. You'd better agree with my views or you will fail the course. Or my personal favorite, appeal to force from The Godfather. Either your name will be on the contract or your brains will be on the contract. Again, appeal to a force or a threat rather than persuasion. I think this is the last one. It is the complex question or trick question. It's a question designed that either a straight yes or a straight no answer, either straightforward answer will imply something something undesirable. The most famous example of this is, do you still beat your wife? Well, surely you don't want to say yes, but what happens if you say no? That means until very recently you used to, engage in domestic abuse. My personal favorite's the second one. Do you only seem like an idiot? You don't want to say yes. Yes, I do seem like an idiot. But what happens if you say no? No, I don't just seem like an idiot. I actually am an idiot. Is what it implies. By the way, this is why here I'm going to give you all some free legal advice. I'm not your lawyer. Do not talk to the police because they're very good at asking questions like this. Do not talk to the police. They are much better at this game than you are. Do not talk to the police without a lawyer present. Unless you're just trying to talk yourself out of a speeding ticket. That's probably okay. Anything more serious than that, Use your Fifth Amendment rights. All right, let's get some practice. Ooh. Actually, let me find a session number. I did not put up a session number. All right, session number 711-126. 711-126. So there's 3 ones in there. 711-126. All right. Are you still wasting time with all that book learning? Still wasting time with all that book learning. Yeah, this one's pretty easy. This is a complex question. It sort of is loaded into the question that book learning is a waste of time. And you either say yes, and you affirm it, or say no, and you affirm it. So both ways, both straightforward yes and no is designed to be sort of acknowledges the false claim embedded in the question. All right, the Bible tells the truth because it's God's word, and we know the Bible is God's word because it says so and tells the truth. Good. Yeah, that's sort of classic circular. Again, anyone who would doubt the conclusion would doubt the premise. This is sort of out of Bad Apologetics 101. Don't use this argument. You should vote for this candidate because she's intelligent and has much experience in politics. Okay, now this is a pro-con fallacy. Why is it a pro-con fallacy? What might be a con? Okay, well, these are pros, you're right. But what might we be leaving out? Good. I mean, look, these are relevant. This isn't just raw emotional language. I mean, these are claims. A person can be demonstrably intelligent and has a lot of experience. We can sort of document that. But here, let's try it this way. This candidate is intelligent and experienced, and she's going to push for policies that you hate. That's why it's a potential pro-con argument. Just because someone's intelligent and experienced, I mean, those are, they're not beside the point. They're genuine pros, but there might be a con that you're leaving out. It's not a false stereotype. A false stereotype always has to do with membership in a group. So there's nothing in here about membership in a group that says, because this person's a member of this group, we have to vote for them. The ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment, was foolish because its feminist sponsors were nothing but brawless bubbleheads. And Gensler's got to remove that one from his example. That's offensive. All right, now this is an example of one that there's probably several that you could claim here. I mean, it's definitely a bunch of ad hominem claims. I mean, these are all claims about the people involved in it. There's also opposition would also be a very good response. It's saying, here's a group we don't like, so we want to do the exact opposite of what they suggest. And there's also a stereotype operating there that I would suggest is a false stereotype. This isn't what the genetic looks like. Genetic is when we say people came to this conclusion by this method. So it's not genetic. All right, here we go. No one accepts this theory anymore, so it must be wrong. Yeah, this is appeal to the crowd style reasoning. Nobody thinks this way anywhere, must be incorrect. Either you favor a massive arms buildup or you aren't a patriotic American. Yeah, this is what the false dilemma looks like. Yeah, I mean, there is a little, loaded language here, but this is primarily a false dilemma. Why? Because the main use of the argument is you only have two options, my option and a stupid option. So that's what the false dilemma looks like. Because obviously, there's lots of positions one could have on how many on military spending, which is what the argument here is really about. The president's veto is the right move. In troubled times, we need decisive leadership. Good. Yes, this is an emotional appeal. And here's what makes it an emotional appeal. We have no idea what was vetoed or why. All we have are a bunch of overly positive words about the president. That's the right move, troubled times, decisive leadership. But you could say that for literally anything that the president does, as long as he actually does something. So that's what an appeal to emotion looks like. There's no reasons given. Each member of this team is unbeatable, so this team must be unbeatable. Good. Yeah, this is what part-whole thinking looks like. Each member of the whole is unbeatable. Therefore, the team as a whole must be unbeatable. So, and in real life, sometimes a bunch of superstars don't work that well together. Sometimes each superstar expects everything to be about them, and they have a hard time taking on some of those more cooperative type positions. So, this logic does not work. All right, let's see how we do it on time. All right, we've got a few minutes left. All right, let's look at the exercises in 4.1, 4.2. All right, I'll start with number 9, because we've already done the first 8. 4.2a. Number 9. My doctor told me to lose weight and give up smoking, but she's an overweight smoker herself, so I can safely ignore her advice. What's the fallacy there? Yeah, ad hominem. We've changed the topic from is this good advice, dietary advice, to some things about my doctor. So yeah, that's not number 10. Belief in God is explained in terms of one's need for a father figure, so it's false. What's the flaw in that argument? Yeah, that's what a genetic fallacy looks like. This frankly is a classic Freudian style argument. But you know, just because you can tell a story about where somebody's beliefs came from, even if it's a true story, that's not an argument against the existence of God. That's just, it's kind of like the ad hominem thing. It's just some details about how you came to a certain belief or conclusion. Number 11, there are scientific laws. Where there are laws, there must be a lawgiver. Hence, someone must have set up the scientific laws to govern our universe, and this someone can only be God. What's wrong with number 11? Yes, sir. Yes, yes. What's ambiguous?
Well, it's saying like when you use of law, for example,
Right.
like scientific laws versus like Congress passing
Good, good. Yeah, that's right. I mean, just because we use the word law for sort of generalized scientific, tendencies in the world, that doesn't mean that, I mean, you're exaggerating the similarities between political laws and scientific laws to assume somebody has to set it up. I mean, you might as well just say, therefore, there must be some invisible Congress that voted on the scientific law. There must have been some filibuster that was overcome. Again, it's emphasizing the similarities between political and scientific laws. 12. The lawyer for the defense claims that there's doubt that Smith committed the crime. But I ask, are you going to let this horrible crime go unpunished because of this? Look at the crime! See how horrible it was. So you clearly see that the crime is horrible and that Smith should be convicted. All right, well, this is classic emotional appeal. All we did was say a bunch of true but highly emotional things about the crime. We didn't say anything about whether or not Smith was actually guilty. Also, for that one, I think the second point would also have been appropriate. Any other one that anyone wants to hear me do in the last minute or two of class? All right, for next time, I'm going to spend more time on these 4.2 exercises. I will be calling on you. I will be looking for you to, give me answers to this. This is a interactive course. So come prepared with some questions. Maybe I'll show you some commercials. We can analyze some commercials together. That's always fun. Maybe we'll find some clips from The Office or something. Thank you.